Sunday Unity afternoon gathering. We love being here in this place, and several joining us online. It's lovely to see you online as well. Welcome. I'm going to light the Christ candle and use that as an opportunity to get present and to be here and to give thanks for being here and welcoming the Christ light in each of us being here. There we are. And so we surrender into presence, we open our hearts to presence, we allow ourselves to be filled with presence. The presence, our source, our God, the Christ energy, the Christ light. And know that as we surrender into presence, we are free. And so let us read the opening prayer of affirmation, which is our affirmative version of the Charles Fillmore invocation. And we'll read it together out loud. I am now in the presence of pure being, immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, love and wisdom. I acknowledge thy presence and thy power, O blessed Spirit. As I open to the flow of divine wisdom and love, I let go of any thought of limitation, for pure substance and love are manifesting in my world according to thy perfect law. And let's follow it up with our mission statement that we wrote all those years ago for Unity Maidenhead, and we'll do that again with the same appreciation of oneness together. We provide a loving and welcoming environment where we nurture a spiritual way of living. Together with Spirit, we create abundant and healthy lives through prayer, learning, empowerment and joy. We celebrate, bless and appreciate our oneness. And so it is.
And today's daily is my source. I'm never away from Spirit as I move through this life experience. How often do we put a label on ourselves or others? We should never define or limit ourselves by the many roles we are called upon to play as we move through our human lives. There is no end to the infinite power of creation expressing through us. Our spiritual source will never declare us to be complete. We are one through all eternity, always creating, always bringing more of our divinity into realization. We are never apart because we are one with Source, both individually and collectively. When we turn our thoughts to God and live as expressions of love, we extend the power of Spirit through every challenge we face and every choice we make. Now the Son of Man has been glorified and God has been glorified in him. John chapter 13, verse 31. I'll just read the affirmation once more, and perhaps we can sit with it for a few minutes and take it into our hearts. I am never away from Spirit as I move through this life experience. am never away from spirit as I move through this life experience. Perhaps we could say it 3 times. Once as I, and then as you, and then as we. So I am never away from spirit as I move through this life experience. You are never away from spirit as you move through this life experience. We are never away from spirit as we move through this life experience.
Thank you.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a soul like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see.
The 12 powers are referred to as the 12 powers of man, and these were things that Charles Fillmore, our founder, brought into Unity, and they consist of a whole range of things. Just look at the list. Things like faith, strength, love, imagination. There's 12 of them, and Unity looks upon those 12 things as the elements that we can draw upon in our daily lives as we go forward in our life. And we've been going through one of them a month this year, and this month it's will. So I'm going to be talking about will. And before I get into that, I just want to use a Bible reading that I will come back to as I go through the talk. And this is from Job. Job 22, verses 21 to 28. Agree with God and be at peace. In this way good will come to you. Receive instruction from his mouth and lay up his words in your heart. If you return to the Almighty, you will be restored. If you remove righteousness from your tents, if you treat gold like dust, and gold of Ophir like the stones of the torrent bed, and if the Almighty is your gold and precious silver, then you will delight yourself in the Almighty, and lift up your face to God. You will pray to him and he will hear you, and you will pay your vows. You will decide on a matter and it will be established for you, and light will shine on your ways. So that's a reading from Job. Now, in thinking about will, hoping that's going to stay open, how many people have been out for a walk somewhere and come across typically a young couple with something like a 2-year-old who's yelling and stamping their feet and crying they're going to have their way come hell or high water here? That's will. You've just seen will in action. Now, we normally refer to that with young children as being willful, and we make it wrong for some reason. Yet I'm betting that every entrepreneur that's made it big in this world was that little willful child and was allowed to carry that forward.
When I was 17, I became a student governor at one of the top 10 colleges in the UK. So I was technically still a child, even before I became an adult. I can do that as an 18-year-old. I was also the sabbatical president of the Students' Union of that college, Southgate College, which now called Barnet Southgate College. But I'm aiming, that's a while ago now, but I'm aiming to get to that level of experience again. Like a friend of mine called John Baker, he's a conservative councillor in Luton. He said he's going to put me forward to become a councillor in Luton to run for a winnable seat. I'm trying to get him there again. That sort of level of
Cool.
political entrepreneurship, but not just political entrepreneurship, but literal business entrepreneurship as well, aiming as well.
Excellent.
I'm an investor as well.
I think anyone going down a political route is probably genuinely willful, or else they wouldn't get there, would they? So even though we talk about, I refer to a 2-year-old child, I think actually we've all got the 2-year-old child in us, and no matter what age you are, that willfulness can show through. But the key point about will, for me, is it's indiscriminate. Will doesn't care what you use it for. You can use it to try and create an Aryan race. You can use it to try and heal the sick or do away with poverty. You can use it for whatever you choose. So will is there as an executive agent that does our bidding. And so it's part of the creative process. And I like to think of the creative process as kind of like a factory. And Charles Fillmore always used to talk about something called substance. Substance is something that's come through from the Almighty and appears in our mind as the raw mind energy, the raw intellect that we can use to shape into anything we choose in creating our life experience. So if we think about that substance as the raw material coming into a factory, it's there forever. It's infinite. We can always draw upon it. It's the source that we were talking about in Daily Word. Now, a factory also needs energy to make it turn over, whether it's gas, electricity, oil, or whatever. And I like to think of that as being faith. Because the more faith we have, the more we can create, the more quickly we can create, the quicker we can go down our journey. So faith to me is the electricity supply coming into the factory. But what does the factory create? It needs blueprints, designs, something against something it's going to build from. And that to me is our belief system. And Unity talks about, and I won't go into great detail, about the conscious, the subconscious and the superconscious. Subconscious is our thinking mind. Superconscious is the Almighty, the presence, the essence of who we are. But the subconscious is actually what's creating our world. And that subconscious is built on our belief system. So what we are creating is based on our inherent belief system, based on our life experiences. And that is what that's then the factory is producing in accordance with that belief system. And the thing that's doing the producing is will. So will is the machinery. As I said earlier, it doesn't care what it's producing. It will produce whatever design you give it to the extent of faith you have in that design. If your faith is in, I'm hopeless, you're going to have a pretty shabby life. If your belief is, I'm a good person, I'm going to do well in this world, you're going to be an entrepreneur. So your belief system is the foundation of what will is going to do for you. As I say, I talked about these other powers. Will is the thing that actuates all those powers. It brings them into existence. And typically we say in looking at the 12 powers that will works primarily with love, wisdom and understanding. And if we are using our will in accordance with genuine understanding based on a spiritual background and with wisdom, then we are going to produce the sort of lives we want to create. But will doesn't stop creating. It isn't a case of I sit and I think, well, I'd like to have this or that, so will jumps into action and does it. It doesn't work like that. Will is creating all the time, whether we like it or not. And it's doing it based on those inner beliefs. So even when you're asleep, it's busily creating. And I suspect, certainly in my case, I'm probably doing maybe 3 to 5% of conscious creation and 95% of unconscious creation, creating in accordance with the stories that I've brought up about myself. And there's a lady, whose name escapes me now, the lady who wrote Divine Audacity and now runs...
Linda Martilla.
Yeah, she's just taken as director of Silent Unity in the US. She's written a book, and she looks upon will as going slightly further than I do. I like to think of will as purely this piece of machinery that does whatever you choose for it to do. But she puts his choice into will. So she looks upon this creative process as choice, followed up by commitment, and followed up by allowing. Now we make choice from the conscious mind. And the more we choose to allow the superconscious, our divine, to flow into our subconscious, the more likely we are to create a genuinely divine life. But we have to make the choice in our conscious minds of what we do. And commitment is an interesting one. There's an interesting story. This is one of the books we use in Unity to think about the 12 powers. Interesting book if you've never read it. And it tells a little story in here. If you excuse me, I will read it out rather than trying to remember it. A well-dressed young man saw a breathtakingly beautiful woman walk past Chico's in the mall. It's an American book, sorry. He was so smitten that he followed her as she made her way towards the centre of the mall. The woman saw his reflection in the store windows as she passed them, and finally turned and demanded, "Why are you following me?" He declared innocently, "Because you are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, and I've fallen madly in love with you at first sight." The woman smiled and replied, "I believe you need to look behind you at my younger sister, who is 10 times more beautiful than I." The opportunist suitor wheeled around quickly, saw what he considered to be an average-looking girl walking towards him. "She's nowhere near as beautiful as you," he lamented. "You lied to me." "No," she countered, "you lied to me. If you were so madly in love with me, why did you turn around?" And that actually lines quite nicely with a reading out of Matthew. This comes from Matthew 7, verses 13 and 14. "Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road is easy that leads to destruction, and there are many who take it. For the gate is narrow and the road is hard that leads to life, and there are few that find it." So our young suitor, he was all over the place. He was just taking anything he could get. He was looking at the wide gate. He had no focus. He wasn't committed. He wasn't thinking along the right lines. If that really was the woman of his dreams, he wouldn't have looked at anybody else, would he? So actually it's very important, having chosen something, to get the focus and the commitment to carry it through. And the final step in this Divine Audacity book is allowing. I think it's very easy, having chosen something and in our minds committed to it, but actually be saying no all the time internally and actually stopping it happening. So if we have to allow things to come into our lives rather than resisting them. And of course they don't always show up in the way we first expected. If you're looking for, £1,000, you won't necessarily get £1,000, but the thing you want £1,000 for might turn up in your life. So simply because you shouldn't look for a specific, you should look for a path to follow. Now I chose the hymns today because they're intended to be positive, because we're creating in accordance with our belief system. So if we have happy, cheery, outgoing beliefs, that's the sort of life we'll create. And I think that's the sort of life that most of us want. So I've deliberately got happy, cheerful songs. And we also just had Amazing Grace. I say the wonderful thing in this spiritual world of ours is that there's this eternal safety net. It doesn't matter how many times we screw up. God is always there. Grace is always there. So grace is always there to catch us. There is always another opportunity, another attempt to go around if we choose to. But let's get back to Job. That reading I read out. For those who don't know Job is, in theory, it's a story about basically God having a bet with the devil. There's this wonderful guy, Job, who's the most fantastic adherent of the spiritual way. He's very prosperous, and God's really proud of him, and so the devil turns around and says, "Well, give him to me for 5 minutes, mate. I'll show you how sort of really committed he is to you." And so all these terrible things happen to Job, and then he finds his way back to the path, and he ends up twice as prosperous as he was in the first place. So that in theory is the story, but looking at it from a metaphysical point of view, of course, this is a bit like Jesus in the desert. This is all going on inside the mind. So Job is a story of every man, every woman. When we think we're doing well, life's going great, we get these little self-doubts come into our mind, don't we? And suddenly we start to think, well, is it as good as it should be? Am I as good as I should be? Should I be doing something different? All these self-doubts come in. And if we allow them to, and of course the story of Job takes it to extreme, we can spiral down and down and down, feeding ourselves on a negative spiral. And for Job, it meant that all his relatives died, he lost all his money, he lost his faith in God, everything went wrong. And then when he got to the bottom, he found his way back to God. And that's what this reading is about. I'd just like to go through it again, because it says here, "Agree with God and be at peace. In this way good will come to you. Receive instruction from his mouth and lay his words up in your heart." That's about choosing God, choosing the superconscious, choosing the reality of who you are over the day-to-day trivia that we tend to get wrapped up in. The middle bit's rather longer. If you return to the Almighty, you'll be restored. If you remove unrighteousness from your tents, if you treat gold like dust, and gold of Ophir like the stones of the torrent bed, and if the Almighty is your gold and your precious silver, then you will delight yourself in the Almighty and lift up your face to God. I don't think about the material. Focus on the spiritual. Job in the story had to let go of all of it. All of it went. Everything material disappeared, and he had to find his way back to God, because that's where our salvation and our true prosperity comes from. You will pray to him and he'll hear you, and you will pay your vows. You will decide on a matter and it will be established for you, and the light will shine on your ways. What you choose, commit to, and allow will happen. It has no choice but to happen. There are various laws like the law of attraction, etc., etc., what we're going to today, that actually it has no choice but to happen. If you genuinely hold it as a belief in your heart and you commit to it and allow it, it will happen. And that to me is the real message of Job. And what I'd like to finish up with is a little bit of a meditation. And a bit different from normal meditations. Normally with meditation we have sort of a mantra of some sort to focus on. I'm not going to do that. I did have one, but I decided not to use it. What I'd like us all to do when we close our eyes in a moment is to think about how you would like your life to be. Not in terms of events, but how you would like to feel. As a result of the perfect life that you could envision for yourselves, how would you feel internally if that were true? Because if you can hold that in your heart, if you can hold that belief in your heart of that feeling, then it must come true. That would be you choosing a set of feelings. And if you genuinely commit to it and genuinely allow to it, it can only happen. So I say what I'd like us to do, we'll go into the silence for a few moments and just try and put together the feelings that you would feel if your life was the perfection that you would want for yourselves. So let's just close our eyes, spend a few moments with that feeling. prayer and unity, we finish with gratitude. So thank you, Lord. Thank you that we all feel wonderful on this glorious day. Thank you for infinite supply, the source of all.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be, with God as Creator, family all are we. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my joyous vow, to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
What a voice we have together. Thank you.